Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Isvaro Guraptameti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomavada Vyapata Dehaya Dakshinamurtiya Namaha Sabha Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satiguru Pranatosh Maham Om Shanti Ramji. Verse 60. When the negation of the koshas is done by logical inquiry based on the scriptures, awareness is isolated. Awareness got mixed up, confused, project, superimposed on the... Is that all right? Are we here? Is it you, Silvia? No? When the negation of the kosha is done by logical inquiry based on the scripture, awareness is isolated from Maya, and known to be the self. So awareness is isolated from the apparent self, or self is isolated from the apparent self, so that we can have them put apart and say, okay, this is the self, and this is what was superimposed on the self. Now we know what the self is, and now we know what the apparent self is, so problem resolved. Then we can get the not self, we can join the self with the not self, and there is no big deal. The world remains the same, nothing disappears. It's just that now your knowledge is clear. I know what knowledge is, and I know what the confusion was. The word Atma is usually translated as the self, pure awareness. Yet in Vedic literature, we find Atma being used to describe the body, or prana, or the mind. It's not that the meaning of the word changed, but rather the understanding of the self occurs on different levels of the human experience. So we have the self associated with the body is the body, itself is associated with the pranas, the mind, the intellect, and with the five koshas, the sheaths. So different koshas and different apparent selves due to the misidentification with those aspects of the apparent self. It's not that the meaning of the word changed, but rather that the understanding of the self occurs on different levels. The five koshas are, in a sense, five atmas, so to speak. It's not that there are, we say there are three bodies, there are five koshas, and we can break down our human experience in as many aspects or size and levels as we wish. It's just a question of analyzing for the sake of isolate the self from our experience. The whole process is a process of isolate the self from the self in its human experience. It gets confused with different aspects of its experience. So we just need to undo that superimposition. So the self, I got confused with the intellect, with the ego. So therefore I become the ego, the intellect. So we need to pull apart the water from the milk, the self from its superimposition, its upadi, so that we know, just for the sake of knowing once clear, clearly know one's identity, nature, as consciousness. As the text leads us through a consideration of the nature of each of these sheaths, we realize that they are not limitless. Every one of them we have done that for the sake of proving that they were bound by time, by space, they were changing, they were modifying, so they were not defined as limitless, ever-present, atemporal, and so on. It was just to prove to ourselves that it cannot be the self, none of those apparent coverings of the self, because the scripture, their own nature is not of the nature of limitless and beyond time and space. Leads us through the consideration of the nature of each one of these coverings, we realize that they are not limitless and of the nature of joy, security, and so on, which is the definition of the self. We get a definition of the self, we established that definition, we have agreed, we went through the logic of that definition, now we are compared all those koshas, all those levels of human experience, and say, no, it cannot be the self for this and this and that. Each kosha represents a misidentification, levels of human experience we identify with due to ignorance of one's own fundamental independent nature as the self. One by one, the koshas are stripped away by logic until all that remains is the self, as the witness of all koshas, witness of all phenomena, of all this process of discrimination that is the self, witnessing us, dissociating from this, dissociating from that. So the whole process of net, the self cannot be negated after we deny everything. We negate the self as any one of those phenomenal objects for the sake of isolating the self, and after being negated all these upadhis, we have the self. The self cannot be negated. We negate everything, and then we are left with that which cannot be negated. Why? How can we negate the knower? We can negate everything that can be known and experienced as something other than the subject, other than myself. If it is appearing to me, I know that it's bound by time, because there is no such a thing as an object which is of the nature of permanence. By very definition, is impermanent, every object. Therefore cannot be the self. I am the only one, the only factor, not bound by time. Cannot be negated. I am the only factor that does not modify with the contact of any of those witnessed objects. The self can also be negated. We cannot say that I-awareness do not exist. Somebody could say, no, okay, it sounds good, you say that the subject exists, it's the knower, but I believe that the knower sometimes does not exist. So the simple fact of saying awareness does not exist implies awareness of the fact that the awareness does not exist. So the existence of a factor must be there to even negate the existence of its own conscious existence. So it is by definition the ever-present, ever-present conscious self. Unless we would have other dimensions of awareness from, there's awareness is is the source of this awareness. Therefore, this awareness, when it goes out of existence, and then we have another dimension of awareness, by the scriptures, the first statement is that the nature of existence is non-duality. The self is one, non-dual, limitless conscious principle on which the projection of the world occurs, in which everything is in constant change and modification. The self cannot be negated. To say that I am awareness do not require the existence of the one to make the negation. It requires the existence of the one who makes the negation. It leads to an infinite regression. We cannot negate the self without another self, a second limitless awareness, and again we know that the nature of reality is non-duality, that there is only one self. Therefore the self is advaita, not divided, not two, not parties, not many. The witness, the self, is in the form of knowledge. But this knowledge is not objective knowledge. When we say that the self is of the nature of consciousness or knowledge, it not means that this knowledge is something that can be objectified by the jiva. So this knowledge is of the nature of limitlessness, existence. The very principle of knowledge, intelligence, to produce this projection of mind in which the subject-object phenomena takes place. And then the subject chasing objects as a means to gain experience and knowledge in reference to objects. But awareness is the very knowingness principle, the very knowledge principle, pure knowledge and intelligence. A lot of texts refer to consciousness, some texts, as knowledge. It's just knowledge, and it's very, very easy for us to understand, because we are made of knowledge. We have a conscious mind that is a knowledge mind. All it does is to gain knowledge by the contact with object. We can gain useless knowledge, we can gain esoteric knowledge, philosophical knowledge, scientific knowledge, or we can begin chasing or pursue the knowledge of our very subjectivity, which we call self-knowledge, the knowledge of the knower. I am the knower. But it's all about knowledge. Knowledge is the very same thing as consciousness.
It's not a knowledge part of vidya?
Yes.
Part of the projection?
Yes. The knowledge in reference to objects is the knowledge of the jiva. So the mind of the jiva has the ability to know objects, but the mind of the jiva is a reflex of the knowing principle called awareness. Okay? So fundamentally, we are all knowledge, meaning to say consciousness, but we appear to reflect consciousness to gain experience knowledge of objects.
It's like the original knowledge and the projected knowledge within Maya, which is Nitya. Right?
Yeah, we have consciousness. We may call it pure consciousness, or we can call it original consciousness, universal consciousness. Universal is misleading, but pure original consciousness. Yeah, it becomes a knower and experience with the aid of a jiva, with a certain subtle body which offers the reflectivity required so that consciousness can become a knowing experience of objects. It illumines. So the jiva is a subtle body, is consciousness plus Maya plus a subtle body becoming an experience entity contacting the world of objects. So we become a knower, experience as a jiva. Consciousness, we become a knower and experience. But what allows us to be a knower here is the very principle called knowledge or consciousness. It's the same thing. People have a hard time to understand that consciousness is self-conscious. They say, how not consciousness can be conscious of itself if consciousness is not an object, right? If all we know from our standpoint is the knowledge in reference to objects. So how consciousness can be self-conscious if consciousness is not an object? So it's the same thing to say, like how the sun can, that which illumines all objects, how can it illumine itself? No? Because it's illumining objects. If he is luminous as that, how he can illumine object and illumines itself as well? He's self-luminous. Awareness is self-knowing. Consciousness is self-conscious because it's made of the very stuff that produce the phenomenon called experience and knowledge. It's made, and also and Maya is a projection of that knowledge, experience, and intelligence, knowledge that produce this universe, which is governed by precise laws, beautiful, intelligent, governing the functioning of everything, operating everything. It's pure knowledge. Its consciousness is self-conscious, self-knowing, self-effulgent. Yes, Samadhi.
When we say existence knowledge, we mean eternal knowledge, not any kind of particular knowledge.
No.
Because here can be mistakes. Some people asking, so you are studying Vedanta, now you know that you're the self, you know everything.
Right.
You know? It's different kind of knowledge.
Yeah. Knowledge, when we say knowledge, is as a synonymous of consciousness.
Yes.
Existence, consciousness, and limitlessness. So knowledge is equal to, is used as consciousness. Yeah.
Can I ask you something? The last question?
You can be the second.
What is Vedanta then? I mean, is it part of Maya or is it outside? Is it also part of the project?
Vedanta is just an object in media.
Is it an object in media?
Yeah.
So we have to get rid at the very end also of...
Vedanta serves only one simple purpose, which is a knowledge that can be applied against ignorance to neutralize ignorance so that the individual realize its identity as consciousness, and therefore he is before and beyond and free of knowledge and experience, knowledge and ignorance. The only purpose of Vedanta is to neutralize ignorance. You understand? We are creatures, and we have been living here operated by ignorance. We think that this is our knowledge, but it's mostly misconceptions, wrong notions in reference to the nature of the I, the nature of the self, reality, and so on. We have been living that way, under the spell of Maya, ignorance. So we need the knowledge of the scriptures to be applied against the ignorance, so that we are free from knowledge and ignorance.
And it's not contaminated? Taking into account that it's part of Maya, is Vedanta not being contaminated?
No, because Vedanta was not originate in Maya. Vedanta is not a scripture that was originated by an individual through its mind. It was revealed directly from the self to the rishis, individual. So it comes from Ishvara, from the self, and for the purpose of helping us to analyze our experience and undo all those misconceptions that bound us to suffering, to objects and suffering, dependent, leaning on objects and so on. So it's just for the sake of freeing us. The simple analogy is that the thorn that is used to pull the other thorn in the forest. No? It's a use and throw. No? Even though it's advisable that even after we are free, we have this knowledge, the knowledge is hard and fast, it's good to keep a certain association with the scripture, because once you know what knowledge is, why to associate with ignorance? Yeah? it's naturally, life of someone with knowledge is going to gravitate around people attracted by knowledge. And all those misconceptions and those chasing of objects and the values for things that, do not really deliver satisfaction, joy, and completion, all of those things begin fading. When you see, you just like to contemplate on your own nature, the self. And there's this means of knowledge that it's all about that. It's about our nature and the nature of the Lord, Kama Yoga, Dharma Yoga, and self-knowledge. Knowledge, Ishvara knowledge and self-knowledge. Those are the best game in Taos. So to keep your mind clear about the Lord, how it operates, how it's in our best interest, how to act, how to respond to the field. Keep the mind clear, keep our Satyamitya all time fresh, because ignorance is hardwired. There is always some remainings of ignorance that may pop up. I have met several people that were free for some time, and then ignorance came back and began condition the experience of life again, like this guy that began now writing me. So it's better we have the knowledge and we keep the knowledge. I have a friend of mine in Brazil that got self-knowledge about a year and a half ago. He was doing many retreats with Ramji, and all my retreats in Brazil he was doing as well. He was really into it. He was full on the scriptures, on his inquiry, and he was asking questions all the time. And then it got clear to him. He got it. He was very happy. And then he started writing to me and write to Ramji, and we say, this is it. Ramji was also confirming him. And then he was sad. He would say but the funny thing is that I'm not attracted to Vedanta anymore. I cannot even read my Vedanta books. I had all these books, the new books that he had purchased, and he says, I can't even read anymore. I lost the appetite for Vedanta. And then I say, that's the purpose of Vedanta. You don't need to carry Vedanta, drag it around, with all these books and this knowledge. And at least in my life, every time I went through a stage in my spirit development, I did exactly like Jennifer, 2 or 3 times. Here it goes. All my library of spiritual books go. Boom. I had all the books around Osho Rajneesh and psychologies and so on. When I left Osho Rajneesh, all my books, boom, giving out free. And then another collection, Papaji's and that, and Nisaga da da da, and then recently, then all again. And now I have a few books of Vedanta, but even those I left in Brazil somewhere, and I have a little bit here, a little bit in Italy. So we don't want to carry this thing around. But this guy was a little bit sad because, but he was not really sad, he was finding it strange. At the same time, he knew that he was not seeking anymore. It was over, he found. When we are looking for the key of our car or our scooter to go to satsang, and we don't find the scooter, and then we develop a tendency to look for the key, a vasana, and then we find the key. It could be that vasana remains a little bit. You have the key, you're still looking for it, and then sooner or later you realize, no, I have the key. This problem is done. I will never look for the key again. It's in my hands. So when you find what you were looking, which is yourself, when the knowledge is clear, you no longer seek. People think that maybe if you go to visit Ramji or go for a seminar, you go because you are still seeking the self. No, Ramji has among his friends several people that go there, they know who they are. But they do because they love to be in that environment. They prefer to be associated with knowledge rather than with stupid gibberish we find in samsara. This guy, just to complete, this guy went, he spent about 6 months or more just living samsara, enjoying relationships, intimacy. Before he was trying to get a lover, he was not getting, and then he said, now there is something in me that all women are coming to me. He started enjoying all those things. And then after some time he started feeling like, what seemed to be sweet, now it's turning a little bit bitter. It's not that fun samsara anymore. He was connected again with family members, spending time with his family, which is from another state in Brazil and so on. And then when you saw, he was booking the seminar, he was coming to see Ramji last year, and he's coming again to Spain, and he's back on his books, because what else to do? Once you know what knowledge is, what ignorance, why not to keep the association with wisdom, and keep your mind fresh? Yes.
That's because his knowledge was not really consolidated, or because it was just an experience which disappeared after a while?
No, it's because when you understand that you found what you were looking for, the seeking, searching ends, ceases. You are not seeking anymore. That's the most intriguing thing, is that you know that game is over, you found what you were looking. A lot of people in the spiritual world do not know what they are looking for, but we from Vedanta, we are Yanis, we know we are looking for myself. I know already, but somehow this knowledge is still a little bit shaky because there are some doubts challenging that knowledge, not preventing me from enjoying fully my true nature, without any suspiciousness or vacillation. So when you see it, the direct knowledge takes place, and then you feel like, so what now? I was thinking for 30, 40, 20 years, and now it's over. But he had that, and then the other side of it, he was enjoying going back to the world. Before the world was providing them experience that were not so pleasant, and now he was enjoying, in fact, the world is beautiful. My wife is nice, my family is not that bad. I thought my problem was my mom. Now I go to see my mom is beautiful. I'm enjoying my brother even, I'm going to the stadium to watch football with my father and so on. So he was just getting back into life and enjoy, because he was standing as awareness from that platform. Life is beautiful. But then he got tired of that, and he felt, no, it's better I keep my mind on the scriptures because it's a fact. Ignorance is sneak, hardwire. It can sneak by the back door. And I heard so many stories about that. It is a fact. It may come back. So you need to keep doing your nididhyasana so that you clean up the warehouse of ignorance-based vasanas. You keep just applying knowledge as these remainings of ignorance. They keep surface. You keep applying the knowledge of the scriptures.
And that's for the rest of your life.
Yeah, but it's not an effort anymore.
Excuse me?
It's no longer an effort. It's just a natural, easy sort of sadhana, association with knowledge. The only way to be free is by knowledge. Even Ramana said, only by knowledge the self can be realized, and only by realizing the self you can be free from suffering. So it's only by knowledge. So you have to keep your knowledge fresh and firm in your mind. You're a woman and you're from Argentina. You don't need to remember you were born in Argentina. You don't need to keep reminding you. This is a hard and fast knowledge. Right? Nothing's going to change your mind about that. But imagine if you just got that information, somebody comes to say, hey, by the way, you were a woman and you were born in Argentina. In the beginning, you have to remember. You have to work on that a little bit until that is well established, that knowledge, and then you don't confuse yourself with a cat or a dog or anything. No, I'm a woman. So likewise, the moment that you have this knowledge, I am the self and there is only me, is such a radical knowledge And ignorance is going to be pressing your mind, trying to say, no, the nature of reality is duality. And you have to go and get things here to be secure, safe, and enjoy yourself. So it keeps coming. Any small challenge of life may bring about some remains of ignorance, and then immediate knowledge has to be fresh. I know from my own experience, few times, very rarely, I stayed away for some time. I'm lucky because Ishvara has assigned me this position of sharing Vedanta. And then since I have this assignment, I have my mind all the time on the scriptures. And Ramji told me the best way to grow is by teaching, because I did not understand very well why, but it's because I'm doing all the time my Nididhyasana. I read once Dayananda saying that the best Nididhyasana is teaching, because you are living, and not only you are in contact with the scripture, but you can only teach Vedanta if you are a living example of it. So and that helps to make this knowledge harder and harder, faster and faster, always good, full confidence in this knowledge is what counts. Just imagine somebody has full confidence in the knowledge, and then something bad happens, like we heard a few times, and then the wife goes with his best friend and he loses 20, 30 years love relationship. And then immediately, before he was free from any circumstance, immediately he becomes the husband, and he's bound by the suffering of losing his wife. So he came from here. His misidentification came back, and then he's suffering.
And then you have the knowledge to clean it up and identify yourself back to awareness. Yeah, at that point you have to go back, work your qualifications, see how could you, if you are really established as awareness, you imagine, chances are that you are not really established as awareness, you are imagining to be, and you are talking big as if I am established as awareness. A lot of people in the spiritual world talk. So, but if you're a real teacher of Vedanta, you need to, it's very few people want to be a teacher of Vedanta, it sucks. You cannot have a bunch of disciples doing things for you, working for you, giving money to you and this and that. And very few people come to your class because nobody has a developed value for Vedanta. So if you are assigned to be a teacher of Vedanta, moreover, you cannot be breaking rules right and left. You cannot be cutting corners or violating Dharma. You have to be a living example, otherwise forget it. Sooner or later you are exposed, you understand? And you have to have a full confidence in your knowledge. Your knowledge has to be firm. And in the beginning, this knowledge is there, it's clear, it's direct, but it's not that firm. As the year goes by and the Nididhyasana carries on, this knowledge becomes. That's why we say that self-knowledge, self-realization is the beginning. Now you know. Now you don't need to look for anymore. You know the story of this old lady in the countryside in the United States, and she's there, and she spends all day. They used to how you say? No. Yes. So no, there were some socks from the grandchildren, and she was doing the holes, fixing the holes on the socks.
Darning. She was darning.
Yeah, darning. She was darning some holes, and then she lost her needle. And then this other woman was going by and saw the situation. This woman all outside there in the balcony looking for this needle, looking. And a very old lady, she was a grandmother for many years. So this young lady goes there and says, let me help this lady. So she said, so what are you looking? I mean, I watched you more than half an hour. He said, I lost my needle. And then she started looking and said, but please tell me more or less, where did it drop? I say, oh, it dropped in my kitchen. And then why you're looking here? It's because there is more light in here. Yeah, more light. So it's it's a mistake of apprehension. So once you found what you're looking, you're not going to be looking elsewhere, because you know you are it. You know, you don't keep going out in the kitchen or in the bathroom, looking, or even outside in the porch. So you know, I am it. I found it. But this knowledge can be challenged here and there, as Ishvara throws you some circumstance of life that brings forth, the jiva with its vasanas, its likes and dislikes, and that's when the knowledge has to be just side by side to neutralize those impulses born out of self-ignorance. Some of them persist for some time and then they go fading.
Sometimes there are live events, going on that also pull you back somehow.
Yeah.
And that's quite difficult.
That's what I was describing. Some challenge, some adversity may come,
yeah.
And then we immediately come from our knowledge, and then we have to be honest. That's what we are saying the other day, James? So it requires such an honesty, integrity. Let's say, I need to do more work here, rather than say, this is all ignorance. I am beyond ignorance. No. Knowledge is only as good as it translates as freedom. Otherwise, what is the good of knowledge? If it remains here, but the life of the teacher is an expression of violation of Dharma, and take advantage of people, manipulating, controlling, and so on. We cannot negate the self without another self. A second limitless awareness to witness the negation. What can distinguish one limitless awareness from another? There cannot be two entities. The self is Advaita, we covered that. So this is a nice one here, and let's read this said. But this knowledge is not a knowledge of an object, self-knowledge. The witness, the self, is in the form of knowledge. That's why the beginning of all this Q&A, that is not in the, it's in the form of knowledge, consciousness. But this knowledge is not an object. For then the self would have to assume the limitations of an object and it would be subject to negation. Any object can be negated. Any knowledge in reference to any object is subject to error, correction, revision, and so on. But the knower cannot be negated and does not need to be revised or corrected. That's the principle called consciousness, awareness, and we are that, Tattvamasi. This knowledge can only be the knowledge of one's own nature, which is formless because it's limitless. So we know that there are objects that are formless as well, like space, air, and thoughts, and so on. But this is an object that is limitless. It's not an object which is formless because it's limitlessness. Limitless. The nature of the self is limitless and formless, although there are some objects that have no form as well. As I'm trying to make a point. Yet the witness is not to be equated to the blankness of deep sleep. This is very important as well. The witness is not equal to the void or the emptiness of deep sleep. That is the most common confusion we make between the self and the Nandamaya kosha. The state of deep sleep or the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where there are no objects and there is no subject and there are no objects. So it's blankness, it's void, emptiness. The self cannot be equated to that state which is similar to deep sleep. Why? Because that state has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It changes, it modifies itself. It's bound by time. For it, and the witness is not to be equated to the blankness of deep sleep, because it knows itself as the awareness in which all these things are known, including the blankness of deep sleep. Awareness is the knower of the void, the absence of object. Awareness is the knower, is the most common thing. So to help us to conduct this inquiry is that anything that is known cannot be myself, because I cannot be the known and the knower. There are only two factors operating in Maya, is this duality, subject-object, and I am the subject. So anything that can be known and perceived, by definition cannot be me. Because I'm the one which stands apart from any object of knowledge, any and all. That's what made me stand up and never go back to do my sadhanas. When I understood that, anything I was gaining from there was time-bound, was known, and I want you just to know the knower, and I am the knower, but somehow I was not very clear. And what is the purpose of keeping producing these beautiful objects of experience if they are not me? I'm in search of me. I mean, no matter how crazy it may appear, I'm looking for me. Until it clicks and say, how can you look for yourself? You are yourself, right? And that's the moment that one sees the absurdity of the pursuit of self-realization, self-knowledge. Then koshas are known by the self, but they do not know the self. All the 5 koshas, they are inert. They don't have consciousness. They are inert material, gross and subtle and super subtle, but they are all inert. They don't have consciousness, therefore they cannot be the self. The self is the very fabric of consciousness. Yet it's only through the self that the koshas appear to exist. Discrimination negates the koshas. Then negates the negation. That's nice. Discrimination, the most fundamental tool of Vedanta, it negates the koshas, the superimpositions, and then it negates itself, negates the negation, and then it has served its purpose, The self is beyond negation, beyond knowledge and experience. It negates the negation, because there cannot be such a thing as the not self. How can you have a not self or no existence? We have already established that to state that there is no self or no existence, we need a principle, an existing principle to make such a statement. Some existing principle should be there to state there is no existence.
Having a difference between duality and non-duality. You make that step and then there is nothing else as there as awareness. Right?
Sorry?
That's what you are saying. You are negating everything because you are looking at the thing from the awareness point of view. Meaning all what has been negated is also being negated. I mean, it's nothing there besides awareness.
the discrimination happens here, the nididhyasana, we keep negating everything. And then we can, the self, by the way, is the only thing that cannot be negated. Because we negate everything that has only an apparent, dependent, transient existence. The self is that which is always ever existing. So we negate everything, and then we can negate the negation, because the self is that which cannot be negated. In order to say that there is no self, we need to have another principle to say there is no existence, there is no self. So therefore, we have the proof that the self is always ever present, always ever existing. That's the point.
So we negate the snake, and then we also negate the rope.
Yes, ultimately we negate the rope. Yeah, it's all the self. Yeah, we negate this. We negate the waves, and then it resolves itself as the ocean, and then we negate the ocean, and the ocean resolves itself as water, which is, in the analogy, consciousness of the self.
And then we watch the soccer game.
Huh? Yeah. And then you enjoy the show. Discrimination against the quotient, then against the negation, for there can be no such a thing as not self. The cautious, in the end, are merely the snake seen in the rope. They bring the snake here. The cautious, in the end, are merely the snake seen in the rope. They are not real. They are a projection of Maya. If this is not entirely clear to us at this point in the text, neither is it so for the earnest disciple, because the whole text of Viveka, like most texts, is a dialogue between the teacher and the student. And then there is a statement here, I don't know if it was Dayananda or if it was added by Ed. If this is not entirely clear to us at this point, neither it is to the disciple, the student, who asks for further instructions into the nature of the non-dual self and will now receive it. No, it's a nice way to say, So if it's not absolutely clear for you, it's the same is with the disciple, because he's going to keep asking for further clarifications about the nature. The self, which you will receive. The next chapter begins, we're going to, finally enough, we are out of this cautious. We're going to move, I think, into, because very soon these verses become very, very juicy and nice. And it is the self, your essential nature. Verse 61, just to get a little flavor of it, the self-awareness can be known by anyone with discrimination. It is self-luminous, a partless whole, distinct from the five koshas, the witness of the three states of experience. It's changeless and untainted by anything that is in contact with it. Untainted is unmarked. Nothing can make a spot on it, a stain on it. Okay, so it's not affected by anything. It's changeless, untainted by anything that it is in contact with. So the self is the witness of the three states. It's self-luminous, a partless whole, distinct from the five koshas. It is the witness of the three states. It's changeless and untainted by anything that is in contact with. So we're going to start by verse 61 tomorrow. Sorry for my voice today. I hope it's going to get better. Otherwise, I'm going to just use signals tomorrow. And now I'm going to get better. What is our Okay, let's offer our gratitude for the lineage and the teachings. Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Isvaro Guratemeti Mochibeda Vibhagine Vyomavada Vyapata Dhyayam Dakshinamurtiya Namaha Sava Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharanta Magocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satiguru Paranashyama. Shanti, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Ramji.